Hello, everybody, and welcome to the NASCAR Pinty Series Power Hour here on GeForce TV. I'm your wingman, Cam K. We are here on an off week for the NASCAR Pinty Series. We've finished up at CTMP. First, want to say hello to Sean Harrington in the chat. Want to thank you for tuning in. Appreciate it. And hopefully everybody can hear me this week. We hopefully don't have any technical gaffes in the microphone. If you are in the chat, I'd like to hear from you and let me know how you are doing this week. We don't have a ton of stuff to go over this week because, again, we are not racing until the 11th at Chaudiere. However, there is some Pinty's related stuff that we do want to go over and talk about. First thing we're going to do is we're actually going to check in on our standings before we head to Chaudiere. And let's get a quick review of our point standings as of right now. Kevin Lacroix, with that win, is your points leader, but he is only a points leader of 1 point over Trayton Lapsovich, who sits second in the points. Alex Tagliani third. And how about Gary Clute and Brandon Watson for RGC Sports, making 3 of the top 5 in points RGC Sports drivers? That's pretty fantastic. Marc-Antoine Cameron, after his amazing start to the season, is only in 6th place in the point standings. Some tough luck for him. LP Dumoulin currently sitting in 7th in the point standings. And JP Bergeron, the rookie, in 8th. 9th for Dexter Stacey, and veteran DJ Kennington sits back in 10th. Mark Dilley sits in 11th. Larry Jackson 12th. TJ Renamato is 13th. A tough start to the season for Brett Taylor, who finished last at Sunset Speedway and fell back quite early at CTMP. He is going to look for a rebound at Chaudiere. Brian Cathcart, Wallace Stacey in 15th and 16th in Cathcart's return to the series and in Stacey's rookie season. Andrew Ranger, not somebody you would be accustomed to seeing so far back in the point standings, but he has had some tough luck to start the season, only managing 17th in the point standings after 2 events. He needs to get winning if he wants to get up into that points battle. Of course, the last 2 full-time competitors, Glenn Stiers and Sam Fellows, 18th and 19th. We expect to see those guys move up throughout this season. Part-time guys, Rafael Lessard, LP Montour, Daniel Bois, Peter Clute, Brent Weller, Matthew Scannell, and Ray Jr. Courtemanche round out your 26 drivers that have taken to the track so far this season in 2 races. Now, we do know at least 2 names that are going to be heading to Chaudiere. Now, let's take a look at our possible entry list at Chaudiere. There is, of course, rumors. You can always say rumors on possible other entries. I'm only going to put this out there because it is an off week for the Xfinity Series. Alex Labbe has not committed to running at Chaudiere, but he was supposed to run Chaudiere last year or the year before it was rain. And that ruined it, and we know that Alex Labbe would be a great ambassador to come back to the series as a former champion. We know his funding situation right now with the Xfinity Series is not clear. He is was not at the race at Charlotte, unfortunately, due to funding problems, and that is the first of what is expected to be multiple races that he's not going to be able to make because of that. So hopefully he's able to make a start for Dave Jacobs Racing. If not, I think you could definitely see the 39 of Alex Gannett out there. Of course, I've got no knowledge if Alex will actually run that event, but because he was not at CTMP or not able to race at CTMP, perhaps Gannett will make one of these off starts on a short track this season. I would think of all the tracks he's going to do it, this would be the place to do it for him. So let's take a look at our rumors or possible entries. Again, not all of this is confirmed, but Glenn Stiers, of course, running the full season. Expected the 0 car to be out there. JP Bergeron in the number 1. TJ Renamato in the 2. Brett Taylor in the 3. Rafael Lessard is back, and he'll race at Chaudiere. Now, this is a track that he has won before, so we can look to him for him to be very, very tough. Brandon Watson, though, This is his first chance at this racetrack, and I think we're going to see something really special from the RGC Sports guys. Brandon Watson is a short track specialist. He knows how to win on the short tracks. I would not be shocked to see Brandon Watson running up front in that number 9 car for RGC Sports. Also, Matthew Kingsbury in Duro King Autosport, which was hoping to be at Sunset Speedway. They did not make that race. They did confirm on Twitter that they are going to be at this race. So definitely Matthew Kingsbury in that number 12 car will make his first start of the season. DJ Kennington, Alex Tagliani, and then Trayton Lapsevich. Now, I spoke with Trayton on last week's show. You saw the interview with him. He's very excited to go to Chaudiere. It seems like a track that he would be very, very good at. Andrew Ranger is looking for some stability to start this season. Unfortunately, he's had a tough start so far with a mechanical failure at CTMP, and they just did not have a good piece at Sunset Speedway, so hopefully we'll see him. Now, Simon Gianvienne, that is not confirmed that the 37 is going to be there. However, I was able to speak with SDV, and he is hoping that he's going to be able to make an announcement pretty soon. Hopefully, he will be able to make the race on June 11th. Gannett, of course, I'm just throwing him in there as a possibility. Then you got LP Dumoulin, Gary Clute, Mark Dilley, Wallace Stacy, Brian Cathcart, Kevin Lacroix, our most recent winner, Donald Teague. Yes, Donald Teague will be at Chaudiere, unable to make the first race of the season due to some situations with parts, I believe. But Donald is ready, and he's going to take his own team to Chaudiere. They were out there testing. We haven't yet seen the paint scheme reveal for that number 80 car. He's also going to be doing a couple late model races. So he's very excited. I know the Don is ready to get going. Larry Jackson, Dexter Stacy coming off of his first ever podium finish at CTMP. Marc-Antoine Cameron and Sam Fellows. Now, if there was going to be any other names I haven't heard, the only other person I could think of potentially would have been Alex Labbe. But again, there is no confirmation whether or not that's happening. I have been told no, that it's not happening. So we'll have to see. But either way, for Chaudiere, this is a fantastic lineup. This is a huge field, all things considered. Now, obviously, we could get a bit more. There is also supposed to be a sportsman event that's taking place on Chaudiere, a 100-lapper, and this is supposed to be a 300-lapper at Chaudiere. Hopefully, the weather is nice and good because Chaudiere has unfortunately been impacted by rain the last couple of events that they've had there. So hopefully they'll be able to do the full race distance. Now, as we continue on with this, there was also some news later on that took place throughout this past week. Now, obviously, with it being a rare off week for the Pinty series, we do have a really spread out season, and it's weird for us that were part of last season because it was so compact. There was not a lot of time in between races. You're going almost every week to another race. Now this year is so spread out. Chaudiere is on the 11th, and then they go to Eastbound Park on the 25th of June. So actually, I'm not going to be at any of the events in June. So that sucks. You know, I'd love to be able to go to Chaudiere. I'd love to be able to go to Eastbound Park. Not this year. Hopefully this year's goes without a hitch, and everything works out. However, there was some difficult news that does regard Eastbound Park, and that is our man right here, Phil Fowler. He was expecting to be at the event at Eastbound Park. Unfortunately, that ride is not going to happen any longer, and the local man, Phil Fowler, is not going to be able to make the Pinty Series race. Now, that's right now. Maybe some ride becomes available. Maybe somebody like a Brian Cathcart sits out, or a Renamato, or somebody gives him an opportunity to race. I'm not expecting that. At the very least, you could see maybe a rental ride become available. We know DJ Kennington typically has rental rides available. Jim Bray, Larry Jackson. I just don't know if there is anything available. I don't think any cars are left. So unfortunately, Phil Fowler's ride is not going to happen, and he is not going to be at the Pinty Series event. Difficult news for him. But, whatever happens, it's still going to be a great event, and Philip hopefully is able to get an opportunity to race in the event next year. Now, if you saw by the announcement that he put there, he is still racing and going to be racing quite a bit this season but the Pinty Series event is not going to happen for him. I have not heard any confirmations on Sarah Thorne yet either. I'm not sure what's happening with her situation. I know it was announced previously, but I am not aware as to which team she could potentially be with. Now, there's some more team news that happened in this past week after his phenomenal run at the CTMP race. MBS Motorsports announced that Daniel Bois and their team are going to run in Toronto. Now, this is a fantastic story because they made their first overall start. They were up and battling for a podium with 2 laps to go. Unfortunately, because of a couple double overtime, I believe it was a double overtime, they lost fuel pressure and the car unfortunately sat idle on the backstretch, and he was unable to finish the race. But this is so exciting for a brand new team to come out here and be so competitive right off the start and then be able to add a race to their schedule. And I think Toronto is actually a very, very good place for them to take that logical next step. Now, obviously, Daniel had mentioned to us last week that he's more of an oval track racer, but you could definitely see that his road course skill is up there and he can battle with these guys, especially for a team that's so brand new. To be able to compete right off the start is extremely impressive, and we're really excited for them. He actually ran our stickers and scuffs decal on the side of that 31 car on the right hand side, right behind GM Bolton, Bolton GM, which was really exciting for us. I mean, we weren't expecting that, and they put out one hell of a great run on. And for a team like this is a very, very promising start. Hopefully this means that there's going to be more in the future for them. Obviously, they're going to stick with Toronto and CTMP for right now, but you never know if maybe they go and think towards maybe we'll go to Delaware for the finale because it's the last race of the season. I mean, we've seen that. We saw it last season. Names like Malcolm Strawn and Cole Powell made that last race of the season. There was 3 of them, mind you, but it's something that we could definitely see this year. I mean, you've got names that race weekly out of Delaware, which could be very possible to, like a Ray Morneau, maybe to get a one-off ride, an OSS driver like Michael Herniak Jr., something like that would be very cool. And to see something like MBS Motorsports be able to make their first oval track race too, shows that they're heading on the right side of things. I think right now, though, they're going to focus with just these 3 races, and depending on how they do, maybe we'll see more of them next year. But that's absolutely fantastic news. Congratulations to the entire team, Jay Fredericks and the entire MBS Motorsports team. They're amazing people. They were extremely friendly at CTMP, came up and said hello, and we definitely want to continue to support them, as much as possible, because we want more teams in this series as much as we can. And, having another new face coming in and being so impressive right off the start was extremely exciting, and we don't always get to see that in NASCAR action. Now, there is a name that we are going to see later this season in the Western races who was able to do something very special this past week. That's right, Chantal Kalika. This is a full screen for this. Chantal Kalika ends up winning the Sportsman Series event at Sutherland Automotive Speedway. How about that? A win at Saskatoon for our girl Chantal Kalika. Celebrated a birthday last week and comes home with a checkered flag. How about that for Chantal Kalika? Congratulations, Chantal, our good friend out west. This is a very, very good start to her season. And, of course, we'll see that 43 AGI Dodge in the races at Sutherland Automotive Raceway and at Edmonton. Now, that's obviously coming up in the next couple of months, so Chantal's definitely itching to get back behind the wheel, but a very big congratulations from all of us here on GeForce TV and all of us in the NASCAR Pinty Series community group on your race victory. It's something that we definitely want to see. We see more women in motorsports. Samantha Shaw, who is not in the NASCAR Pinty Series, but she's a mini stock racer, she also got a win at Flamborough Speedway. So it was a pretty good weekend all around for women in motorsports. As we're going to continue on here, this past weekend there was no action in terms of the NASCAR Pinty Series. However, there was some really big stuff that happened. Obviously, if you pay attention enough to the Canadian motorsports scene, you'll know that there is the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. And each year there's inductees that are from all across motorsports, whether they're a builder of motorsports, they're media or they're a promoter, whether they're a sponsor or a driver, they are nominated and are put through basically a bunch of panelists who then decide whether or not that individual meets the criteria of being in the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. And we were lucky enough to have some pretty big representation from the NASCAR Pinty Series and CASCAR. Now, if you are not familiar, the NASCAR Pinty Series is essentially a continuation from the NASCAR Canadian Tire Series, which was a continuation of CASCAR. Now, CASCAR was bought by NASCAR in 2006, and the NASCAR Canadian Tire Series debuted in 2007. So, in a way, yes, there's stuff that's predating NASCAR owning the series, but it is all kind of tied together as one. Now, we had some really big names that were part of our series that were inducted this past weekend. And it's not just for 2021. In fact, this dates back to 2020. So there's a couple of names, and I realized here that after I put this together that there's a couple that I did not put on here after a bit of finagling. First off, Kevin Dowler, and Kevin Dowler was not actually at the ceremony, and there really wasn't an updated picture of Kevin that I could use for this. There was a picture back that I found from like 2002, but that didn't seem right to put that picture on here. Now, Kevin Dowler was the dominant force here in CASCAR on the road courses. He was a dominant force. He was a champion in this series. I think he won the Western Championship 5 times. Constantly a impressive road course racer, and I believe it was 2002 he came from the back to the front to win in Toronto. Not only did Kevin Dowler do this amazing job as a racer, but he was also a big promoter and helped create tracks out west. Now, Kevin's kind of gone a little bit quiet, but you may have known the name Noel Dowler that was in this series for many years in the number 5 MCO car. So Noel had a good presence in this series, but Kevin came before and Kevin paved the way. I always remember that number 35 that he raced MCO on the car. And for one thing or another, I people may not be able to make the event. I would have really loved to see Kevin there and kind of see how he's doing and kind of get a recent picture of him. But obviously, you want to thank Kevin Dowler and congratulate him for making it in. Also, another name was Patrick Carpentier, very well-known name in the open wheel circuit. Now, I thought he had a bit more historical presence in CASCAR in the Pinty series. When I look back, it looks like he only did make the one start. So unfortunately, he didn't have the history that I was hoping, but I know he does have a big role as an RDS commentator and definitely does a fantastic job representing Canadian motorsports. Now, if there are some names on here that you might be unfamiliar with, that's okay. There are names that maybe I'm not familiar with too. Maybe I was not aware of who they are. I'm going to do my very best to try and recognize them the best that I can. So we're going to start with Chaudiere, who is a member of the media and also was part of the CASCAR media relations team as they tried to become a national series. Now, obviously, as you know, racing in Canada is not an easy thing. So the fact that Claire was able to be a part of that team that helped get this series to what it is, obviously we want to show some recognition there. Now, obviously, he did a bit more media stuff that's not pertaining to the Pinty series, not pertaining to CASCAR, but because he was involved in the early parts of it, I definitely wanted to make sure that we included him. Former Pinty series / CASCAR competitor Bertrand Godin was another driver who was in this series. May have not had the most success in the Pinty series, but I will always remember the 33 Arctic Cat car, and that was Bertrand's car. He came and participated in several race events. Didn't stay for long, but he nonetheless was a participant. So we want to make sure that we send out our biggest congratulations to him. He has a bigger history in motorsports than just the Pinty series. So obviously, I want to thank him for all he did. Another name that maybe I wasn't as familiar with was actually Jim Martin. And Jim Martin was the PA announcer at Mosport or Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. So a lot of people may not even have known the voice, may not have known the name behind the voice at CTMP, but he was recognized as well being put in the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2019, but we want to obviously congratulate him for all he has done and for making Motorsport what it was. That's one of the things. He had a long history as a commentator for sports car racing. Obviously, that's not the same as what we're covering here on this show, but still, because we were there at Motorsport, Cascar had been there countless times every year. He's the voice, and Pat Gonzalez, I believe, is now the voice there right now. But definitely, most congratulations out to Jim Martin. Now, there's a couple other names that maybe people aren't as familiar with. Philippe Brasseur as a really, the reason I wanted to bring him into this is because of Pole Position Magazine. Now, I don't read Pole Position Magazine, but I've been people have been very helpful with this, and I got some very helpful resources from people within Quebec. And this magazine that he has put together is the only motorsports magazine in Quebec. And not only that, he's the voice of the Grand Prix de Trois-Rivières, which is without a doubt one of the biggest festivals of motorsport in the entire country. So Philippe definitely deserves his seat in the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame for all he does. And, it's great. It's great to have somebody that has put, and what we really like to mention here is Pole Position does a fantastic job covering the NASCAR Pinty series and its drivers from Quebec. Obviously they do whatever they can to cover this series, and I think that deserves respect. And so Philippe, congratulations. He was unfortunately not at the ceremony as well, but congratulations to be being part of the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. Now, this name that we're going to add is Big Z, Bill Zardo. If you're unfamiliar with Bill, legendary name across Ontario. His son Bill, and of course, grandsons Lane and Billy are also part of racing. Pete Shepard the third is also part of his extended family. Bill was a competitor in CASCAR and the American Canadian Tour, which you can actually find. American Canadian Tour races, legendary ones, are actually on YouTube, so you can actually go back and watch them. The ACT Tour is now really kind of dominated by Quebec drivers, but back in the day, there was a large presence from Ontario, and Big Z was one of those names out there that competed. He started in CASCAR in 1981, and the funny thing is, he's not done racing. He was out there racing an Oscar Hot Rod, and finished on the podium at Sunset Speedway. I believe it would have been last weekend. So congratulations to Bill Zardo. Of course, you can see his grandsons, and you have been able to see, of course, Pete Shepard out there racing. I know his grandsons are still out there racing and doing a pretty good job of it nowadays as well. To a current crew chief and current driver's father and grandfather, Matthew Scannell, who is a current NASCAR Pinty Series driver, just finished the race at CTMP, and of course, Howie Scannell Jr., a longtime competitor in CASCAR, the Pinty Series, and now currently a crew chief. His dad, Howie Scannell Sr., was also announced as part of the Hall of Fame. And, what a special moment for the Scannell family, especially considering, you've got 3 generations of racing, and that famous 99 is now back being raced by Matthew Scannell, the 99 that Howie Sr. made famous. And it was awesome. And what's funny is I look at Howie Sr. and I definitely see Matthew Scannell's face. They look very similar. But congratulations to the entire Scannell family. What a great honor for the entire family. Glenn Stiers, now, he might be a NASCAR Pinty Series rookie, but he's no rookie to success in the dirt racing world. He's no rookie to putting together an amazing racetrack facility. He's also been responsible for names like Kyle Larson having the success that they have had. Glenn Stiers was nominated by our good buddy Clinton Jeffrey here at G-Force TV, and Glenn, of course, runs our G-Force TV logo on his Zero NASCAR Pinty Series car. There doesn't get more legendary than Glenn Stiers in Ontario and what he has done. He's also done a lot for the Indigenous community He's had a TV show on APTN spotlighting the Indigenous driving scene, and I absolutely love that about him. I mean, I haven't had the pleasure yet of being able to interact with Glenn, but that's part of the plan for this season while we're out there, is to be able to interact with this amazing guy who does so much for the NASCAR, and not just NASCAR now, but like because they're bringing Schweikens Speedway. They made that deal. They were going to have the first ever dirt race before the Cup Series kind of hijacked that, but Glenn Stiers has done so much for racing, so much for the dirt racing scene, so much for racing in general, that it was really nice to see him inducted, and a well-deserved induction. You can't say well-deserved without the guy who was the king of Delaware, and that's Steve Robley. Steve Robley is a two-time CASCAR champion. Steve is also a six-time Sportsman Series champion. Now, if you don't know, CASCAR Sportsman used to have, it's like a junior division to the CASCAR Series. They're also known as Lucas Oil Sportsman Cup, now known as the Ontario Sportsman Series. Steve Robley, what can you say? He's one of the most dominant guys ever to be in a race car in Ontario, in Canada, and a well-deserved and long wait, but he finally did get it. Steve Robley, I'd like to see him come in and race a couple more times at Delaware Speedway. Now you can see his son, Matt Robley, racing in the Pro Late Models weekly. Actually, he and Matt both raced in the Ontario Sportsman Series, and one of the very first races I ever saw for the Sportsman Series in 2005 at the Peterborough Speedway had Steve Robley there. So congratulations to Steve, a well-deserved spot in the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. You can't speak about Hall of Famers without a legendary driver and a legendary car owner. He's still going strong at 89 years young. Jim Bray, who I've had the absolute pleasure of getting to know at the racetrack and speaking to him on the phone, has stories like you wouldn't believe, of interacting with names like Richard Petty and David Pearson. He has been one of the only Canadians to participate in the Daytona 500. He's made 15 starts in the Cup Series, but he's also been a legendary team owner here at home. Names such as Doug Brown, Joey McComb, Larry Jackson have all driven for Jim Bray. And of course, this season, who does he have? He's got another famous name in Fellows, Sam Fellows, driving for him. Jim Bray doesn't know the meaning of quit. He still has the ambition and goals to build successful racers here in Ontario. And he does it, and he enjoys it. You can still tell that he enjoys it. He actually, for a small time, had an ownership role in the Ontario Sportsman Series. He's been in countless opportunities for racing, and you know what, for somebody who had never met Jim until last year, it was an absolute honor to meet him, and he is an extremely humble gentleman, and we're really lucky to have him. So it was well deserved for Jim Bray to be named to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. We're going to the last three names that we're going to talk about here for the Hall of Fame, and they all play a big role in the NASCAR Pinty Series / CASCAR. We're going to start with Alex Nagy here. I had to go full screen because Nags is just that beautiful that he needs a full screen. Now, Alex Nagy, if you aren't familiar, was a CASCAR racer and a very big winner, actually. Won the most, I think it was the most banked, like the most money for a CASCAR race ever. And Nags always was somebody that I knew the name, but didn't really know much about him. And I knew he was a racer, but then I found out after all those years that he was actually the man in charge. He was the series director of the NASCAR Canadian Tire Series for 5 years. And anybody that I have come across that talks about Nags talks about how much of an amazing person he is and how much he gets the racing scene. He's able to be in a series director role. You have to be able to be in charge, but you also have to be, somebody that's approachable. And from what what people have told me, and just from my own experience with him, he is all of that plus more. Alex Nagy, of course, being a driver it's never easy to step into a different role, but he's done several. Not only was he the role of a series director, but then he also became part of the team at Jukasa, and that revitalization with Kenny Hill was Alex Nagy, and they brought Cayuga back from death to become what was an amazing facility, and he was part of that, as general manager of that amazing track. Unfortunately, we don't really know what's happening with it now, but without Alex Nagy behind the behind the wheel, behind the visionary with Kenny Hill, I don't think it would have been possible. And now you can see him and hear him every week on Wingnut Sports in Driver in Deep with Mark McSporran. Of course, he hosts a podcast, and we in the Stickers and Scuffs podcast had just started out, and he and Mark invited us on their podcast. And I got the sense right away that why people like Alex so much. And it's not easy to keep a series going, and it's not easy to keep tracks going, but he's been able to do that. And so Alex Nagy takes his spot in the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, and I could not be prouder and happier for Alex. And I haven't known him that long, but you meet people right away, and you're just like, that's an amazing person. Right away. And wasn't no slouch behind the wheel either. He knew how to win. Had one of my favorite looking CASCAR race cars, the AC Delco number 93. So absolutely love to see Alex Nagy get his place in the Hall of Fame. Now, I could put this next guy last because he is that important. He's the most current active name of this list. But I have a special person that's gonna be last. So we're gonna put LP Dumoulin. Look at this snazzy guy here. Our champion, 3-time champion, WeatherTech, Dodge number 47, LP Dumoulin. That's right. He's not just been in the Pinty series. People seem to forget. He's been racing for so long. He's been in open wheel sports cars. He's really done it all. And the NASCAR Pinty series is where he has found his home recently, but he's also been in Trans Am. He and his brother have both raced at Daytona in the 24 hours. And LP Dumoulin has now come through and won 3 championships in the NASCAR Pinty Series and could potentially get a record-tying 4th championship with Scott Steckley this season if he's able to do so. It would put him, of course, as the only active champion 4 times at least. So LP Dumoulin has, and again, when we talk about people that do more than just race, this would be the guy that does it. When you interact with somebody and he treats you like you're his best buddy, you can tell the type of personality he is. And in terms of a champion that you can be proud of, this would be the man. LP Dumoulin does an amazing job with the kids at the racetrack. I always was so impressed with how energetic and excitable he is, how much of a great personality he is, even when he's down and out. And he was down and out at CTMP, and I came after the race, and I went to give him a pat on the back, and he gave me a wink. Doesn't have to say nothing. He's pissed off, but still showed respect and acknowledged me, which, he didn't have to do that. And, like I said, he does a fantastic job with outreach. They do fantastic initiatives. He's got an amazing team, and not everybody is built that way. And for him to be in a leadership role within this series and now be inducted in the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame shows a lot more than just his racing talent. It shows a lot about his character. So congratulate LP Dumoulin on making it to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. I think it's a little early for him because I think he's still got a lot more in the tank. But you know what? It's definitely well-deserved. And I'm pretty sure JF will be there pretty closely behind. Now, lastly, for the Hall of Fame is, well, he's my personal hero. One of my personal heroes, really. I've had there's two broadcasters that I always tried to mimic. when I played with my 164 cars on the kitchen table. And one was Alan Bestwick, who I was lucky enough to get to interview on our podcast, and the other was this man right here, Ron St. Clair. Ron St. Clair was the voice of CASCAR for many years. Not the only voice. Obviously, Pat Gonzalez, Billy Rouse Jr., names before, names after, with Dave Bradley and Adam Ross. But to me, this was the name. He was the voice. The way he announced names, I would always remember the inflection he had talking about CASCAR, talking about drivers, talking about what they did on the racetrack, showing that excitement, showing the stories behind them. And it's funny because as soon as I saw him, I was like, wow, he looks exactly the same. And the other thing about Ron that really always impressed me was just the way his inflection was on race day. You know, we're very blessed in Canada to have such amazing broadcasters like Greg Callinan, like Adam Ross, Dave Bradley, Todd Lewis, that show that excitement in their voices when they hear and they broadcast a race. This was one of the guys that showed me that CASCAR racing is just as exciting, if not better, than NASCAR racing. And all of a sudden, my fake races that I used to put on changed from being from being NASCAR drivers to CASCAR drivers. And we wanted to go see a CASCAR race every year. And unfortunately, me being a young kid at the time, I was petrified to go say hi to him. And I really wish I had, because, he's not obviously with the series anymore. He lives out, and I believe he's out in BC now. And but Ron was always the voice for me that I wanted to be. I wanted to be him and Alan Bestwick, a combination of both. And I wanted to announce CASCAR, and I wanted to announce NASCAR. And, it's funny because it took 30 years for me finally to get the opportunity to actually be on a pretty good platform to be able to do some sort of announcing. And I always think about Ron St. Clair anytime I think of CASCAR. He and Billy were the first names that I ever had watched CASCAR on Speed Channel. It's the first time I'd ever seen it, and because the Speed Channel used to have these broadcasts week in and week out, and he's how I heard the name DJ Kennington, Mark Dilley, Kerry Mix, Don Thompson, Cole Pern, Dave Jacobs, Peter Gibbons, Dave Whitlock. Like, you just remember them because you hear his voice and you hear him going over the races again. And it was awesome. Honestly, he was he was always the face I remember. I always remember his face. I always remember his voice with CASCAR. And of course, now when you go into the NASCAR Pinty series, I'd love to see him come back for some sort of a throwback night. If we ever were going to do one, a throwback night would be extremely exciting, I think, to be able to have some throwbacks, drivers' names, appearances, paint schemes, whatever the case may be. But congratulations to all of those who were inducted into the Canadian Motorsports Hall of Fame this past weekend. Obviously, it does open up a question now, because obviously we don't have a ton of stuff to look forward to this week because the NASCAR Pinty Series is not actually going to be back until next weekend. Puts a little bit of a question mark. And I put that out there. There's a couple people watching here. And I'm curious as to who from the current NASCAR Pinty Series do you feel is next to go into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame? Now, obviously, we've got some other names that are there. Okay, we have people that are already in the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame who are from CASCAR or from NASCAR. Like that obviously makes sense. Like that, we already have those. We had a couple new ones this year. However, there are names that we already have that are already part of it, like Scott Steckley, DJ Kennington's still part of it, Robin Buck, Ed Hackinson. I've actually pulled it up right now so we can kind of go through names right off the top of my head, at least, that I know. Jim Robinson, who puts the broadcasts on. Peter Gibbons, David Whitlock, Tagliani, Don Thompson Jr. Obviously, those are some names that you got to look at. Now, one of those names that I don't see on here yet is Kerry Mix. Mix is probably one of the best ever to be in this series. I'm curious if anybody else has some nominations who they think of, because of course you have the option to induct somebody. There is an induction form at cmhf.ca, and you can definitely put forth your inductee, nominate somebody. They are accepting nominations, and I think from our series, there's still quite a bit. Like I mentioned, Kerry Mix is one of them. Andrew Ranger, I don't know if he meets the qualifications. Again, you have to be racing for 25 years or retired for 3. Kerry Mix, obviously, I think is one of those. And Mark Dilley would be another one. And I know Mark he's probably a little quiet, and probably wouldn't expect me to say it, but I think Mark Dilley is somebody who 100% would fit, because he's also done a lot of ownership positions, tracks like Sunset Speedway, I believe Sauble Speedway at some point as well, Barrie Speedway. He's been a team owner, he's been a competitor, he's been a champion, he's been able to have countless sponsorship deals with some pretty big reputable companies. And then of course you've got the fact that he's now part of this brand new organization that is now helping young talent in the NASCAR Pinty Series be able to race in RGC Sports. He's done that partnership with TJ Rudamato. So Mark Dilley has done an amazing job at keeping longevity in this series. I think Mixie, of course, definitely up there. I think Billy Burns is somebody else who, crew chief wise, definitely is on that list of somebody who belongs as a Canadian Motorsport Hall of Famer. Getting championships in any series is not easy, but the fact that he's been able to do it multiple times tells you, got the skill. Wesley says that Jason White's another one that when you come out from Sun Peaks, British Columbia, yeah, he might not have the most success in the world, but you keep coming out. And Jason White is one of those guys that does that. Jason has not only done it in Canada, but what Jason has actually done is he's been able to get top 10s in the Truck Series and the ARCA Menard Series. And one thing that he's been able to do is do it with teams that don't have the budget of running up near the front. Jason, again, is somebody who he kind of just randomly, it seems like he randomly showed up, comes from a long line of racing royalty in a way. And I definitely believe that Jason, Wesley, to your point, I agree. Does he fit the Hall of Fame criteria? Well, there's a lot of things that you can do in racing to, you might not be the most successful. You don't have to be the most successful to be nominated. So you can definitely go out there and you can nominate Jason White. I think, obviously, you get to names similar of that nature. When you go to the most successful names, J.R. Fitzpatrick would be another name that I definitely would put up there as somebody who is going to be part of a Motorsport Hall of Fame eventually. I don't know if he's there yet, but the fact that he was the final CASCAR Series champion, he's been in the NASCAR Pinty Series, he went down south. He had opportunities to be successful there, but not really a ton. I think coming back up here, being able to step into a race car and win right off the bat, he's, won championships. He just won this past week at Flamborough Speedway. So, JR is another guy who I think that fits the mold as a former Pinty Series competitor. I think you don't have to go very far to find a lot of names. Jason Hathaway would be another one. Jason came from, an opportunity where he got a rain-shortened victory in 2008 at Kawartha to then all of a sudden really becoming a championship force with Team 3 Red. And they were always a team that weren't there. They had opportunities. They were kind of midfield, I feel a lot of the times. Ed Hackinson's team was always kind of in the middle. But when Jason came on, they really came on. And they were starting to get race victories quite consistently. And then, of course, they won the shortened championship in 2020. And he kind of went out with a bang that year. But I think Jason Hathaway would be somebody as well that we could definitely think of. When it comes to the Pinty Series itself, obviously Todd Lewis has to be the name from Canadian Motorsports. Todd has oh my God, the amount of respect I have for Todd Lewis and what he does, and just the personality he is, it's remarkable to have somebody in a position like that who has covered this series for years. I don't even know. I honestly don't know the Pinty series or CASCAR without Todd Lewis. I don't know motorsports really without him at all. I remember going way, way back to Global Television with Todd Lewis as the pit reporter for the Molson Indy. And he was always the pit guy for the Molson Indy. I always remember seeing him as that was his role. And he's been kind enough to be part of the Pinty series as a pit reporter for, probably longer than I've been alive. I don't know exactly, Todd. I know you've told me several times, but I tend to forget these things now. But it's remarkable when you think about somebody like Todd being a part of this. When you think, okay, Ron St. Clair getting nominated this year, I look at Todd Lewis and go, well, that's definitely somebody. Yeah, Westy, you're a little bit older than I am, though. So I know you remember Todd on the radio, but you're older than I am, Westy. You don't want to rub it in. But yeah, I mean, there's still some very good names. Obviously, Jack Monahan would be a name that I think a lot of people would be definitely really interested in seeing in the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. Obviously, I'm pretty sure he's not in there yet. I could be wrong because I didn't go that far back. You would think that he would be. I don't see him so far, though. Yeah, so that's another guy right there, Jack Monahan, who was a former Pinty Series competitor as well. CASCAR back in the day. It's just, you say the same with Earl Ross. Like, Earl Ross is in the Hall, but that's somebody that definitely you would look at and go, oh yeah, that's a definite lock, for sure. I think that there's so many names that we could look towards for representation in next year and in the future. Obviously, we talk about JF Dumoulin. JF Dumoulin's done a heck of a lot of stuff. Andrew Ranger, same thing. It's funny. I think of Ranger and I always think like he's got to be like so old now, right? Because it seems like he's been around forever. And then you look at it and go, oh my God, he's not that much older than I am. And it feels like some of these drivers have been around for kind of forever. And he's only 4 years older than I am, right? And Pete Gibbons is in the Hall of Fame already, Westy. So he was definitely up there. But I don't know. I gotta go with either Mixie or Dilly. I think those are the next two in terms of drivers that you would think definitely belong in there, at least from the Pinty side of things. And that's really why we're on the show, is to talk about the NASCAR Pinty Series, right? So the NASCAR Pinty Series hour. There's other interesting things like sponsors that definitely support. And, one of those names I think would be something like Herb Group, longtime sponsor with Scott Steckley. They've been around forever in this series. And so that would be something that I would think Herb Group of companies, Brian Cathcart. I know he may not be the most flashy name out there, but Brian Cathcart supporting so many years with DJ Kennington. Obviously, Castrol is already in the Hall of Fame. I think WeatherTech will eventually get in there because of their long-term support for Canadian motorsports. And this is what's exciting, is that we have now an avenue to kind of talk about it. There's also other people in terms of track ownership and promoters, people within the officials. I mean, I can't really speak to those because I'm not as familiar with the long-term officials in NASCAR, at least up in Canada. So, but I think that we've started the conversation here tonight, and we're getting ready, obviously, for the 11th at Chaudiere. And there's definitely going to be a very good representation in the race at Chaudiere. Now, it's been a while. It's been, 2019, and I believe the field's not going to be as busy as it was this time around. So hopefully we're going to be able to see all those people in the actual event Mainly because I think it's just going to be chaos. We know what's going to happen between Lacroix and Clute. I don't know if it's going to happen at Chaudiere. I don't think so. I think Gary is going to pick a very solid move at a very solid and opportune time. I don't think that Gary's the type of guy who's going to just take his revenge out so quickly. I think we all are pretty aware that that's going to happen at some point, for sure. And I think we'll be ready for it because we're not done yet. We have to remember Cameron and Lessard had a little bit of a get together at Sunset Speedway. EHR and Cameron, that's still together. That rivalry is not done by a long shot. I don't think that you're going to have any sort of change there until EHR feels that they're vindicated. And whether that means they go out and dominate and win the race. And that's very entirely possible with Rafael Lessard coming back to a track that he absolutely dominated to win his first NASCAR Pinty Series race. So we're going to hit the pause button on the episode for this week. Obviously, there wasn't as much to talk about week in and week out when there is no racing, but we try our very best to talk about some of the news and notes as we head into Chaudiere. Now, I'm not expecting that we're going to do an episode next week. Obviously, we're still waiting for a NASCAR Pinty Series race, which is going to be on the 11th. If you haven't already, make sure you check out the local listings till you can catch the CTMP race. But it is also available on YouTube if you're looking for the NASCAR Pinty Series at Sunset and CTMP. Just type it in YouTube. You can find some of the race broadcasts there. They are also back on TSN. And if you have Flow Racing, I believe you can go and rewatch all of those events. That is it for me this week here on GeForce TV. Make sure you tune in for Race Rivals Race Chat every week on GeForce TV. Also, make sure you're paying attention because this weekend, we also have the APC Series and the Quick Superstock Series at Flamborough Speedway, which will be live here on GeForce TV. Adam Ross, probably Greg Calnan, and Clinton Jeffrey will all be there on the calls. One other thing, keep your eyes peeled. There is 2 tickets from our friends at Quick available for the Autodrome Chaudiere race on the NASCAR Pinty Series community Facebook group. We're trying to figure out kind of how we're going to make that contest work, but I think it's probably going to end up being something along the lines of whoever comments first gets the tickets with the correct answer. So definitely keep it peeled there, and we will catch you all on the 13th. So we're going to be off next week because there's still not going to be Pinty's race next week, so we're going to take a week off. We will be back on the 13th for the NASCAR Pinty Series Power Hour with me, your wingman,